Hi, thanks for being with me today. Today we're going to talk about handbells. Hi, thanks for being with me today. If you tuned into virtual worship yesterday, you probably saw me playing handbells, or actually, more correctly, you saw 6 of me playing handbells. I had a fun time doing another multi-screen project, which is leading up to a bigger project that we'll talk about later on down the road. But I'm glad that you enjoyed that. I'm glad that you enjoyed worship yesterday. And today I want to talk to you about one final aspect of my position here at Orchard Park, and that's directing handbells. Now, handbells are a lot like, in a way, a lot like the pipe organ, in that on the pipe organ, the smaller size pipe you have, the higher the pitch you have. So if you have a little bell, makes a high pitch sound, and if you have a larger bell, makes a lower pitch sound, and if you have a really big bell, like one of these guys, it's a very low pitch sound. Okay. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about how the handbells are constructed, where they came from, how the history of handbell ringing came to be. Basically, in a nutshell, handbell ringing started in the late 18th century by English tower bell ringers or change ringers. And if you've ever seen in the great big bell towers in Europe, the huge bells that weigh thousands and thousands of pounds, and they're rung by men and women pulling on really long ropes, those are called change ringers. And the change ringers used to, well, they had a couple of different functions. They would do change ringing to the different patterns of ringing the bells to mean different things. Like, for instance, if somebody important was coming to town, let's say a person in the royal family was going to visit the town, there might be a particular pattern for that. Or if there was something dangerous about to happen and there was a warning signal, like your town was about to be attacked, they might ring a bell pattern for that. Might ring a different bell pattern for marking the different hours of the day, for when you should go to bed, when you should wake up, all sorts of different things. But, of course, way back when, hundreds of years ago, we didn't have the modern comforts of home like we do today. We didn't have thermostats and furnaces and air conditioning and all that kind of stuff. So it can get kind of cold and kind of uncomfortable when you wanted to practice your change ringing. So what a group of people did in England is they had a foundry, a local bell foundry, make a set of hand chimes or handbells that look similar to this. And that way the change ringers were able to take the bells and the pitches that they rang, and they could practice ringing them in more comfortable settings, like say their living rooms, or they can go to even the local pub. And that even happened, was ringing bells in the local pub. And hey, who's not for that? Who's not for that, right? But anyway, so that kind of started the practice of ringing smaller bells to practice change ringing. Centuries later, when I'm now getting into the 20th century, handbells were brought to the United States. And at first, the sets of bells were quite small, much smaller than what you see before you hear. So the collection of handbells that we have here at Orchard Park is actually quite large, and we are very, very lucky to own such wonderful instruments. Almost all of the bells, if not all the bells, that you see on the tables here in the sanctuary were lovingly donated to our music ministry. And the ministry of handbell ringing here at Orchard Park has been going strong for more than 30 years. It was going at least 20 years before I arrived, which was a little more than 15 years ago. And I had just actually gotten my start in handbells just before I came to Orchard Park. I was still kind of learning the instrument and how to direct choirs that play the instrument. And I owe a lot to a lot of the ringers who worked with me early on to sort of teach me the ropes on how the ringing occurs and how it happens and how we make music as a handbell choir. Well, let's take a look at the different instruments that we have here. And let me just do a brief explanation. I'm not going to go over every little piece of the bell, but just give you some of the basics. of the handbell. So what we have here is one of our bells. This is toward the lower end of the all of the octaves of bells that we have, and the handbell is constructed of a handle, usually a nylon or a nylon, plastic, vinyl combination. And that handle almost always will have the name of the note printed on it so that the ringer knows which note is in his or her hand. And in Malmark bells, there are a couple of different manufacturers of handbells in the United States, Malmark being one of them, who's the builder, of our bells and chimes. They put this little insignia at the top of the bell to know that this should be at the top of the handle facing the ringer when he or she is holding it, to know that they're going to ring the bell in the right direction. Above the handle is a little hand guard, which is where your thumb and your forefinger are usually resting beneath. And you actually grasp the entire handle. A lot of people look at a handbell handle and they think, oh, I just put my hand inside it like that. And I can understand that because of the way it's shaped. But you actually hold the entire handle like so. The casting itself, the metal part, is made of bronze. It is a combination of tin and copper. And a lot of people think that it's brass. It is not brass. It is actually bronze, polished bronze. And inside the casting, and most of the time you'll see handbell ringers wearing gloves. I do not have mine on today. And the reason I wear gloves is so that we avoid touching the bell casting with our hands, so that the sweat and the oils from our fingers don't get on the castings and make too many fingerprints, and sometimes it causes etching in the finish that we can't polish off. And then inside the bell, this is the mechanism that makes the sound of the bell. This is called the clapper, okay? And the clapper has a rubber striker on top. And the Malmark handbells, it is adjustable so it can make different timbres. So that if you turn the clapper to the solid rubber setting, that makes the loudest and most bright sound of the bell. I'm going to ring it so you can hear it. Okay, that was probably pretty loud in your microphone there. And then you can turn it this way and you'll see there's a little hole drilled into the piece of rubber. That's going to cause it to make a little bit of a softer, more mellow sound. So it sort of cuts down on the overtones that are ringing. And then we have another setting that has a piece of felt, and that's of course going to be our softest sound and our most mellow tone. So as we go through and we voice our bells, we will adjust the settings on the clappers and the striker here so that the timbre is the same from the bottom of the instrument. And when I say the instrument, I'm actually referring to all of the bells collectively. Just like when I say the organ, I don't say the organ pipes, I say the organ, and that means all of the pipes that make up the organ. So this is one instrument here. This is a 6-octave handbell instrument, and we actually have 2 instruments, and a 5-octave hand chime instrument. So the clapper, let's just take one more quick look inside the bell here. Now the clapper, the sensitivity and the tension on the clapper, notice that it only travels in one direction, okay, from front to back. I guess 2 directions, but it only travels in one direction. And when the handbell ringer rings the bell, he or she is going to throw it in such a manner that the clapper travels from the back to the front, and it strikes a place that is marked with a little line, and it's done at the factory where they have determined that the bell makes the best sound and produces the most pure overtones. And you can barely see it, but there's a little tiny etch, a little scratch right there, and that's where the hammer hits. So the bell ringer will come back, forward, and that's how the bell is rung. Now, the other thing that's interesting to know about handbells is that the sound of the bell, a lot of times when we're training new ringers to ring handbells, we teach them to always keep the casting facing upward, or pretend that the bell is filled with water, and we try not to spill the water when we're ringing the bell. And the reason is because all of the sound that comes from this bell comes from the sides of the bell, the walls of the bell. So if I'm holding the bell like this and the bell is ringing, the sound is being emitted all around it. If I hold it this way, then the sound is going up and down. And I think if I ring this at the camera and I turn them up and down, you'll hear a difference from the sound from having me point it like this and having me point it like this. Take a listen. Now you probably noticed that when it was up and down, the sound was a little bit louder, okay? And that's why we try to keep our castings or our bells facing upward when we ring. Let's take a look at one of the hand chimes, or choir chimes sometimes they're called. These are constructed to be a little bit more, actually a lot more durable than the bells are. A lot of times choir chimes or hand chimes are purchased and used in schools where children might be, be a little bit more rough on them because they just children are rough on things. But basically, the idea is essentially the same. Ringing the choir chime and ringing the choir bell, the handbell, is basically the same. You're gonna hold the hand chime at the base of the chime. Right below the marking that shows you what note you're ringing. And we have our striker here that's going to strike the chime and produce our tone. By the way, the motion that I did just now to turn the tone on and to turn the note off is quite important for bell ringers to learn. A lot of times, new ringers will come and join the choir or join the handbell choir. They will concentrate mainly on getting the note to ring in the right position, but then they forget that we actually have to turn the note off. And there's a couple of different ways we can turn a handbell off. You can turn the handbell off on your body, on your chest. If it's a larger bell and it needs more cloth, more fabric, more body to turn off, you might take a larger bell and instead of damping it just up here, you hear how it's still ringing? It's because it's not getting a full damping, because we want to touch as much of this as possible to turn it off. So sometimes we might do what's called a belly damp, and I just happen to be fortunate in that area, so I can damp a bell pretty easily with the belly damp. It just comes right down here, right at the side. Sometimes we'll even use the table. And our tables, by the way, all handbell tables are going to be covered with at least 3, most of the time 4 inches of foam, so that when we place our instruments down, number one, we don't break them or make any noise, but also we can use the tables to turn the bells off as a damp as well. Okay. We can also do some really nifty sound effects with the bells. One of them is called an echo, which is when we touch the bell to the table and we do something sort of like this. And when you get the entire choir doing that, touching the table like that, it has a really neat effect. Let's talk a little bit about handbell music, actually handbell sheet music itself. Now, back in the early days, if I can have my wonderful camera person hand me the music that's right behind you there. Thank you so much. By the way, I want to thank my lovely daughter Hala for shooting video today of me. Thank you for helping us out. In the early days of handbell choirs, choirs would get together, and very often, when I say the early days, I'm talking about mid-20th century, when choirs would get together and ring handbell music, a lot of the times they would just take piano scores, and they would take piano music, and they would each be assigned their specific notes, and they would ring the notes in the piano score and play piano music. Well, the problem with that is that if you play piano music, and it's not music that's specifically written for handbell choir, the poor guy or the poor gal sitting down at the bottom end of the table might get really bored because they may only have 1 or 2 notes to ring throughout the entire piece. Now, I know that sometimes happens in handbell music too, but nowadays composers try to sort of utilize the entire instrument and the whole length of the table to kind of utilize all of the bells and make sure that we keep everybody busy, but also utilize the different tones and timbres and colors and sounds that are available all the way up and down this entire instrument. But nowadays, if we take a look at the score here, the sheet music, it looks a lot like piano music, right? We have two staves. We have a treble clef and we have a bass clef. And up at the top, and this occurs on every piece of handbell music, every score of handbell music, they put this chart at the top, and it shows the director and the ringers exactly what bells are going to be rung in this entire piece of music. So if I am, say, ringer C and D, that's these two lowest notes right here, I know that in this whole piece, the only two notes that I have to be accountable for are C natural and D natural, which happens to be this C right here and this D right here. And that's all I have to do is play those two notes in the entire piece. Sounds easier than it actually is now, because in handbell ringing, I've started talking about handbell ringers ringing piano music when we got it started with this. The problem with, or not the problem, but the difference between, say, a vocal choir and a handbell choir is that when you're in vocal choir, if you're, say, sitting in the alto section and your neighbor on your right or on your left is not there that particular day for either rehearsal or for performance, that note is still going to be sung by others in the group because multiple people sing the same note, right, in choir. Well, the thing about handbells, and what's unique about handbells, is that when the person who plays in the position, let's say, of E and F, 4, if that person is not at rehearsal and they're not at the performance, well, you can think of this entire set of bells, and if you were to stand where I'm standing, you would see that the bells are laid out in the same way the piano notes are placed on a piano keyboard. You've got C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, so you've got the white notes and the black notes. They are arranged in the exact same order. But if this person is missing, and we go to play our piece, say it's Happy Birthday, then you're going to hear something like, Happy Birthday, happy you, okay? Because it's basically like taking those notes off of the piano and having them not be there, so you're taking them out of the piece. And so it does take quite a bit of dedication and commitment to be in a handbell choir, because your neighbors are really counting on you to be there for helping them out, because it's not to say that people cannot ever be absent from choir rehearsal, because certainly it happens. That's just life, that's just the way it is. But it does get really difficult when the folks on your left or the folks on your right aren't there, and let's say you have a scale that you're about to play, and you're used to hearing the two notes come from this side of you, and you're waiting for them, but they're not there. So you really have to count and focus. And so playing those two notes only that we just talked about, C and D, in that piece throughout, really requires a whole lot of focus for you to follow the score and be able to maintain your count and know exactly where we are in the piece, so you know exactly where to turn that note on and to turn that note off, okay? There is so much more that I can go into with regards to handbell ringing and handbell choirs. You can have anywhere from, a handbell soloist. Now, what I did on Sunday, yesterday during worship, wasn't actually a solo. That piece was written for 6 different ringers to play. I just used a little bit of digital trickery to put myself in the different positions and play it all at the same time. But you can have a handbell soloist ring a piece. To ring up to as many people as 13, 14 ringers. And if you have more than that, sometimes we'll double up people to ring the same notes on another set of bells, so you've got double the notes so more people can ring. But basically, to ring a size instrument like we have here, takes really no less than a dozen people. Optimally, it takes 13 ringers to ring all of these bells. And sometimes, now you'll notice how the bells are sort of getting piled up as we get to the top end here. Just like on the organ, you can take different size lengths of pipe, right? And let's say you have an 8-foot flute, and let's call this our 8-foot flute, right? Okay. Now, if you take that 8-foot flute, and if you could think way back to 5, maybe 6 weeks ago, if you can think back then to what I said about taking an 8-foot pipe and cutting it in half and 4 foot, it then rings an octave higher. If you take that 4-foot pipe and you cut it in half, it rings an octave higher than that. Kind of like a dog whistle. Now, if you've watched our handbell choir ring closely from time to time, you'll notice sometimes that some of our ringers have 2 bells in the same hand. And there are 2 different reasons for having 2 bells in the same hand. One of them is to play a particular pitch and its octave at the same time. Okay? And if I was really, really skilled enough, which I'm really not, but I'll try it anyway, if you get 3 bells in one hand, you can ring 3 octaves. Okay? Now that would be a particularly special piece to ring 3 octaves of notes in one hand. So that's one reason sometimes you see our bell ringers holding 2 bells in one hand, is because we want to take the note and we want to double its octave so that we can play its note an octave higher at the same time. Makes the sound a little bit fuller, just like pulling more stops on the organ. Another reason that you'll find that you'll see handbell ringers holding 2 bells in the same hand is because they're actually ringing different notes. So, if say you were short on ringers and you needed to cover 2 positions with one person, sometimes you can do that by having one person ring 4 notes instead of 2 notes. Okay, now I didn't do that very well because I had the handles facing not quite in the right position. But basically, if I take the handles of the bells and I hold them perpendicular to each other, I can ring one pitch without ringing the other if I do it really carefully. Okay, that's A. And let's say when I need to ring F, I'm gonna take a little more. There we go. I can ring the F without ringing the A. Now, if I really work hard at it, I can ring both the F and the A together, and I get a third. So, some of our ringers here at Orchard Park are very skilled and very gifted in being able to ring multiple bells in the same hand. I don't put myself in that class of ringer that can ring more than 1 bell in one hand. I do my best when I try, but I consider myself being much more comfortable on that side of the table doing this than on this side of the table doing that. But I'm so very, very fortunate and thankful for all the people that come out and ring handbells here at Orchard Park, because it really is a wonderful way to make music. And if you've ever thought about being part of the Orchard Park Music Ministry, and you're not a singer and you don't play any particular instrument, or maybe you played one a long time ago and you want to do something musical, and you can remember at least how the music notation works, how to count meters of 3 and 4, and to read basic rhythm notations like quarter notes and eighth notes and half notes. We can get you started in handbell ringing. It really It's not terribly difficult. It does take a little while to get the hang of, but it's a really fun way of making music, and a great way to contribute to the music ministry of your church. Someday we are going to be back in here ringing this instrument again as a choir. We're not there just yet, but I do have plans. As you've been seeing gradually, I've been slowly trying to perfect the method of doing multiple video screen pieces with multiple musicians. So I do plan to do some more of that as the time requires us to do that. So I would say just hang in there if you're a bell ringer and you can't wait to get back into ringing. We will have some opportunities to do some quartets, some smaller ensemble work, so we can still be socially distanced, and even do some multiple screen video recordings as well. So anyway, I want to thank you for joining me here today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your ministry if you are a ringer here at Orchard Park. And just know that I'm looking forward to working with you again as soon as it's safe to do so. And well, God bless, and thanks for being with me here today.